Tell us about your thoughts on asset managers and institutional investors and what their role in shaping our economy is today.
So the role of asset managers, in particular Vanguard, State Street, BlackRock, the largest asset managers, has grown hugely over the past years. In the 1970s, relatively diversified holders of assets held only 1 or 2% of the corporate economy. Now just those 4 companies hold about 20 to 25% of the whole corporate economy. And because the rest of asset ownership is very diffuse, they tend to be 4 of the 5 top shareholders of essentially every major publicly traded company. And because they hold in a diversified way, and because they have such an influence, they don't have any interest in seeing these companies compete with each other for consumers, for workers, or in the political sphere. And we've seen right along with this trend a dramatic decline in competition measured in a whole variety of ways throughout our economy. And an increasing set of research shows that these two things are linked to each other, that the rise of institutional investors is also leading to declines in wages, to increases in prices, and to reduced competition in this political sphere. So really what's happened is that you've gotten this huge agglomeration of power in this very small number of people who basically are meant to represent the overall interest of people who own capital and seeing the stock market go up, rather than people who are interested in seeing a particular company compete harder and win against its rivals. And I think that that's led to a decline in the competitive spirit that legitimates capitalism for broader society.
And so what do you propose to fix that?
So we think that what we need is that these companies, rather than owning all the competing firms in industry, rather than owning American Airlines and Delta and United, should only be allowed to own within any given industry one firm. So Vanguard could own United maybe, and State Street could own American. And you would sort of have these sports teams of asset managers who would be diversified across industries, but within any given industry, they'd have their pick. And then they would have a strong incentive to govern these companies really aggressively to make sure the CEO wasn't making off with a huge amount of money, and to make sure that the company was competing hard within its industry. So you'd get better corporate governance because you'd have these concentrated ownership stakes, and you'd get more fierce competition.
How is industry taking to these ideas? Industry, the financial services industry, when you propose things like this,
it's very interesting because within the economics profession, pretty much everyone says, if you believe in economics, you have to sort of believe in these ideas, because it's just sort of obvious that it's a huge conflict of interest for these companies to have so much power and control things in such diversified ways. And pretty much anyone else I talk to in the public says, yeah, obviously. But within the financial services industry, people are like, no, I know those guys. Those guys are my friends. They're not reducing competition. And I think what's happened is that there's come to be a whole sort of class mentality among people who own wealth in this country, among the capitalist class, which is like basically 0.5% of the population who has more than that $1 million of assets that I was talking about. And they believe that everything that leads to an increase in the stock market must benefit everyone. But in reality, the stock market represents wealth held by a very small number of people. It doesn't represent the broad economy of the country.
So then how do you propose making markets fair again?
Well, I think that the real problem that we face is that the rhetoric of free markets, which was really intended by people like Adam Smith and Jeremy Bentham and so forth to be a force for liberating people from aristocracy and monarchy and so forth, has instead become the way in which the wealthy and powerful legitimate their control in our present society. But we need to return to the power of free markets to break up existing concentrations of power. So by taxing, as I mentioned, assets and allowing everyone to access them, by using markets to make our politics more open and cooperative, we can regain that spirit where markets were a force for liberation, where today's libertarians and today's progressives were part of a common mission to create a fairer, more equal, more competitive society.